Well, we finally got to a point in the book of Job where Job is finally able to just lament at peace. No more interruptions, no more trying to answer his grief. Instead, he's finally able, just in the peace of his soul, I guess in the turmoil of his soul, but in the peace of the people around him, to just pour out his heart, say exactly how he's feeling as he draws closer to God. From chapters 29 through chapters 37, Job is able to do what he's always needed to do. And so if you have a Bible, please turn to Job chapter 29. Job chapter, who on earth is this Elihu guy? If you have read this book, if you're familiar with the book of Job, you will notice that just when Job is about to be able to lament in peace, some random guy named Elihu interrupts the whole process. He enters into the chat and he is fussy. He is fussy. Just when Job was about to have just the freedom he needed to pour out his heart, the world says no. And Job is brought right back into the courtroom for a fresh round of accusations. It's actually kind of crazy, and it's so not anticipated. You would not have seen, Elihu doesn't show up anywhere else in the book beforehand. He just shows up in the discussion. So we have to kind of examine what on earth is going on here. So I had you turn to Job chapter 29. And let's start our examination there. See what's going on. Because in starting in chapter 29, Job at least felt like he was going to have the freedom to just pour out his heart and grieve. And you see that. Yeah. So chapters 29 through 31, he felt like he had the freedom to grieve. And there's something actually very informative about what he is doing in these three chapters that I think should inform us in how we grieve. So in chapter 29, if you're already there, Job, at this point, he remembers what life was like before tragedy struck him. We're already kind of familiar with what Job's life was like, but now we're kind of getting a little bit more of how he saw his life back then. And so he says in chapters 29, verse 2, he says this, he says, "Oh, that I were, as in the months of old, as in the days when God watched over me, when his lamp shone upon my head, and by his light I walked through darkness, as I was in my prime, when the friendship of God was upon my tent, when the Almighty was yet with me, where my children were all around me, when my steps were washed with butter, and the rock poured out streams of oil for me." Life was good. Life was good for Job. And through the rest of chapter 29, he outlines how he was a respected member of his community. People listened to him when he came into a group of people, and they would stop. They would stand for him. This guy was the one who was respected. People listened to his opinions. He was called blessed. He recalls in chapter 29 here how out of his abundance, he was able to help a lot of people. He was able to help the poor. He was able to care for the fatherless. He says he was able to be the eyes to the blind and feet to the lame. And he was even able to stop unjust people from causing innocent people to suffer. He was able to do all this. And he's reflecting back on his life. He remembers that at that time, his life had caused him to think this. Starting in verse 18, he said, "I thought, I shall die in my nest, and I shall multiply my days as the sand. My roots spread out to the waters, with the dew all night on my branches, my glory fresh with me, and my bow ever new in my hand." Things were good, and Job was happy. And if anybody deserved to have a long, enjoyable life, it would be somebody like Job. It'd be somebody like Job. But then things take a dramatic shift in his grief in chapter 30. And you'll notice it, you'll see the shift in his language because he uses this term now. He says now. He says in verse 1, "But now they laugh at me, men who are younger than I, whose fathers I would have disdained to set with the dogs of my flock. Or verse 9, he says, "And now I have become their song. I am a byword to them. They abhor me. They keep aloof from me. They do not hesitate to spit at the sight of me, because God has loosed my cord and humbled me. They have cast off restraint in my presence." Or verse 16, "And now my soul is poured out within me. Days of affliction have taken hold of me. The night racks my bones, and the pain that gnaws me takes no rest. With great force my garment is disfigured. It binds me about like the collar of my tunic. God has cast me into the mire, and I have become like dust and ashes. And I cry to you for help, and you do not answer me. I stand, and you only look at me. You have turned cruel to me. With the might of your hand, you persecute me." In contrast to how life was for Job, where he was respected, where he had his kids all around him, where he was able to give life to the people around him out of his abundance, now Job has become a laughingstock. The people who once respected him are now his closest friends, now surround him and accuse him of endless evils. They stand trial over him, and his life is defined by pain. Pain that doesn't seem to be going away. And God seems so absent. And he does say hard things here, again, but these are statements of feeling, but still, it's like he feels like God has abandoned him. Life back then for Job and life as it is now for Job stand in some strong contrast. And in his grief, he is wrestling with this reality. And as he's wrestling with this, he does say some harsh things. He says some things that, again, is that it toes the line of orthodoxy. But though it may not seem like it, there is something going on in Job's heart here that is actually deeply healthy. And actually almost necessary. In chapter 29, he acknowledges how things were. In chapter 30, he wrestles with things as they are now. And it's interesting, because as we've mentioned in the past in this series, when it comes to grieving, there is a fundamental need to mourn the life that's been lost. You need to mourn it. The tragedy that struck Job, it actually caused the death of who Job was, even though he is still alive. In a very real sense, all that Job was, all that he had hoped his life would be, died that day when everything was taken from him. And what we see in chapters 29 and chapters 30, it's not so much Job longing for a better time, like he is kind of, but he's really coming to grips with his new situation in life. The old Job had the hope of seeing his children grow old. That Job is dead. And that Job's not coming back. Even if Job gets back all of his possessions, he's not going to be the same person. He won't be the same person. There actually is no going back. And I think that's instructive for us. That actually shows us a bit of maybe what we should be doing when we grieve something. When we mourn a loss or a tragedy, we actually need to do the same thing. Because you are not the same person. You are not the same person following a loss or following something like a physical ailment or even something as mundane as aging. You're not the same person as you were before. And as such, what we see here with Job, again, the book of Job doesn't tell us, it shows us. It kind of shows us the process of grief there. Because you need to process it. You need to process the loss in light of the but now, of what reality is now. What your new life is, what your new self is, what your new reality is. You actually have to acknowledge it and not deny it. Because if a person refuses either to not acknowledge what has been lost or to live in denial of reality, they're delusional. You need to acknowledge both. You need to mourn what was lost. Mourn it, not just pretend it never happened or pretend nothing's ever changed. You actually have to physically have to mourn it. And then you also have to wrestle with, this is what reality is now. And you walk in it in conversation with God. Because the book of Job, it refuses to let us live in a delusion. It refuses to let us pretend like everything is just the same. No, it shows us Job wrestling with these things honestly and in realness and in conversation with God. The whole time he's conversing with God, and he says things again that are hard. But again, he is pouring out his heart. He's pouring out his soul. And as you go to chapter 31, you would see the same sort of thing. He starts pouring out a bunch of oaths. He says, I haven't done this. I haven't done this. If I've done any of these things, it would make sense why I'm suffering. He goes through a whole bunch of oaths saying, okay, what I've not done to deserve this pain. But what he's really doing is he's just interacting with God. He is pouring out his heart with God, and he is seeing in God the answer to all his longings, and yet he's still not getting that answer. And so he's wrestling with him. But that wrestling is instructive. He is doing all of this grieving and mourning, not to draw himself away from God, but to draw himself toward God. And in the process, he says hard things. He is embracing what reality is now, and he knows he won't be able to embrace the new reality unless God meets him. And there's something about that is, even though it seems counterintuitive, it seems like he is saying hard things that he should be chastised for. It's actually something I think is very healthy. Very healthy. And so that's what we got in chapters 29 through chapters 31. And that's something I think we need to take with us. Because he's not happy. He's clearly not happy. But he's looking to God to provide that resolution. And then, interrupting all of this, comes a guy named Elihu. Elihu? Thank you. Okay. One cannot really underestimate how unexpected it is for Elihu to show up at this moment. There was no anticipation that there was any other spectators to what was going on between Job and his friends. There was not even an indication that other individuals were passing by. But apparently, somebody was passing by. And this individual took an interest to what was going on between Job and these three friends. Now, there's a proverb. In the book of Proverbs, there's a proverb that says, whoever meddles in a quarrel not his own is like a person who takes a passing dog by the ear, which is a recipe for having your hand bit, right? But here, Elihu doesn't seem to care at all. Here, there's an interesting little discussion that's going on, and Elihu, he wants to interject himself. And so notice how he's introduced in chapter 32. It says in chapter 32, starting at verse 1, it says, so these three men, they ceased to answer Job because he was righteous in his own eyes. Then Elihu, the son of Barachel, the Buzite of the family of Ram, burned with anger. He burned with anger at Job because he justified himself rather than God. And he burned with anger also at Job's three friends because they had found no answer, although they had declared Job to be in the wrong. Now Elihu had waited to speak to Job because they were older than he. And when Elihu saw that there was no answer in the mouth of these three men, he burned with anger. And Elihu, the son of Barachel, the Buzite, answered and said, there's our favorite word there, right? Answered. You see it constantly throughout the book of Job. It's the one thing Job does not need, and yet it's always what everyone wants to give him is answer, answer, answer. And so he answered and he said. Now, before going on, what do you already notice about Elihu? The dude is angry. He's angry. The author has told us 4 times that Elihu burns with anger. And he's angry at Job, and he's angry at the 3 friends, and he's just fussy in general. The guy is angry. It's like, dude, just relax. Why are you so angry? Why are you so angry? Why are you burning with anger? This is not even a discussion that no one asked you to, give your 2 cents. Why, you're not even related to any of these individuals. Why are you feeling this such burning anger? Well, there's a few things that point that gives us a little bit of indication of why Elihu is so angry. And the first thing to understand about Elihu is that he's young. That's a point that's made very explicitly for us in verse 4, where he says he waited to speak because the others were older. And it's what he himself says starting in verse 6. He says, I am young in years, and you are aged. Therefore I was timid and afraid to declare my opinion to you. We're going to see a little bit later that that's a little bit of false humility on his part. He's trying to say, oh yeah, I was timid. He's not really timid, this guy. But he is acknowledging that he's younger. He's younger. Another thing to keep in mind, and this is maybe a tad bit more speculative, but I think it's justified. If you look at verse 2, where it describes Elihu as the son of Barachel, the Buzite of the family of Ram. Now, this might just be happenstance, but the name Barachel means God has blessed, and that he's from the family of Ram can be translated as exalted family, or family of the exalted. What that might indicate, if it's, it might be just happenstance, but if these names actually reflect some sort of reality of these clans, it might indicate that he comes from maybe a little bit more of a nobility, a little bit more of a comfortable existence, perhaps even a little bit of a sheltered existence. Life has been comfortable for him, potentially. And even if that's not the case, you get from his words that this is where it's coming from, that he has not experienced some things that something like Job has experienced. Elihu is a man who is unable to sympathize with Job because he hasn't lived long enough to experience what Job has experienced. He hasn't had those same experiences. He's likely grown up maybe a little bit sheltered. He hasn't lived long enough to experience this. And because he is unable to sympathize with Job, he's angry. He's angry. His interactions with Job and this problem of evil is not coming from his own experience. It's kind of coming from an ivory tower, more theoretical kind of, I got this stuff figured out, and let me give you the answer. And as a result, sympathy and kindness aren't needed. They aren't needed. And we've all interacted with people like this, right? It's like sometimes you get, some philosophy major, right, that just wants to tell you this is how life ought to operate, right? And it's like, okay, well, thank you. Person tells me how society ought to run, and they haven't paid taxes a day in their life. It's like, okay, well, I want to hear everything that's wrong about how I'm doing things. But whatever, that's kind of the vibe we're getting here. Elihu doesn't have enough experience in life to have sympathy for Job. At least Job's friends, at least they had some experience. At least they had the foundation of a relationship to say some things to Job, even though they said some things that were pretty harsh and horrific. But Elihu doesn't even have that. And yet, he still thinks he's got the answer. He's got the answer for you, Job. And he believes he's a genius. Okay, I'll list them up here for you. But here's some of the words he uses to describe himself. In chapter 32, verse 20, this is how he describes himself. He says, I must speak, that I may find relief. Again, Job isn't really his concern here, right? It's himself. That I might find relief. I must open my lips and answer. I will not show partiality to any man or use flattery toward any person, for I don't even know how to flatter. Else my maker would soon take me away. I don't know how to flatter. Yeah, please, buddy. Or chapter 33, verses 31 through 33. Pay attention, O Job. Listen to me. Be silent, and I will speak. If you have any words, answer me. Speak, for I desire to justify you. If not, listen to me. Be silent, and I will teach you wisdom. Yeah, Elihu's going to teach you wisdom, eh? I'm glad he's got that kind of knowledge. Or, getting near the end of his speech, in chapter 36, verse 2, he says, bear with me a little, and I will show you, for I have yet something to say on God's behalf. I will get my knowledge from afar and ascribe righteousness to my Maker, for truly my words are not false. One who is perfect in knowledge is with you. One who is perfect in knowledge. He thinks he's some hot stuff, this guy. And keep in mind, what's deeply ironic about this is the central contention of this whole book was given to us in chapter 28. And what was that central contention? It is beyond us as humans to have knowledge and understanding of the things that take place under this planet, under the sun. It is beyond us. It is beyond us. He thinks he can answer, but he cannot. Instead, what are we supposed to do? In chapter 28, we're supposed to actually simply entrust ourselves to a God who understands it all. We need to entrust ourselves. We have to commit ourselves. We have to choose to believe and hold fast to God in the midst of the uncertainty, because we as humans, we don't know. We don't know. We don't understand. But it seems like Elihu missed that memo. Maybe he missed that part of Job's discussion because he was already ready to give all his points. See, the older you get, the more you realize you don't understand most anything that takes place on this planet. But Elihu, he hasn't reached that point yet. He hasn't reached that point. And what's ironic is that although Elihu thinks he is just the smartest guy on the planet, and he berates the other three friends for their failed ability to answer Job, in his 6 chapters of talking, his points are basically identical to the 3 friends. If you look at his arguments, they're almost the same, almost exactly the same as what the friends have already said. He doesn't realize, in his arrogance, he doesn't realize he's just rehashing points that have already been discussed. It brings what Ecclesiastes says very clearly to the front. There's nothing new under the sun. There's nothing new. Some people think, oh yeah, now I got something new. And they find out, oh, that's been there before. And so, like, for example, in chapter 34, verse 10, he says this: "Therefore, hear me, you men of understanding. Far be it from God that he should do wickedness, and from the Almighty that he should do wrong. For according to the work of a man he will repay him, and according to his ways he will make it befall him. Of a truth, God will not do wickedly, and the Almighty will not pervert justice." That's the same point that had been raised previously by, I think, all 3 of the friends. Or chapter 39, verse 5, or 36, verse 5. He says, "Behold, God is almighty and does not despise any. He is mighty in strength and of understanding. He does not keep the wicked alive, but gives the afflicted their right." Job, in a brilliant chapter in chapter 24, really exposed the holes in that reasoning. Because, oh yeah, you're saying God is not going to let the wicked live. Well, look at life here. It seems like that's the very opposite. But again, Elihu doesn't seem to be aware that all of this has already been discussed, that we've heard them all before. There's actually nothing new in Elihu's answer. Nothing new. It's only Elihu's arrogance that keeps him from understanding this. The man who claims to be so wise is so ignorant of a truth that's right in front of his face. So ignorant to it. And this arrogance, this inexperience leads Elihu to be harsh with Job, to be angry, to be unsympathetic. He's claiming that his words are just, I'm impartial, I don't know how to flatter, but it's really because of inexperience. Because if you can't sympathize with somebody, you're probably not going to show kindness to that person. Take, for instance, this part of Elihu's long-winded monologue. In chapter 35, verses 9 through 13, he says this: "Because of the multitude of oppressions, people cry out. They call for help because of the arm of the mighty. But none says, 'Where is God my maker, who gives songs in the night, who teaches us more than the beasts of the earth and makes us wiser than the birds of the heavens?' There they cry out, but he does not answer because of the pride of evil men. Surely God does not hear an empty cry, nor does the Almighty regard it." His point here seems to be this, is that God does not respond to the prayers of wicked people. And he's implying Job here. He's making it pretty clear. It's like, God doesn't respond to the prayers of wicked people because their prayers aren't genuine. They aren't genuine, but are instead motivated by self-interest. People like Job don't pray to God out of a genuine desire to know God. They pray to get something. most often relief from suffering, or other things that are ultimately selfish. So God's not going to pay attention to their prayers because their faith is not perfect. Okay, and this is what makes all of these friends and Elihu's points they're mixed, right? Because on the one hand, there's a great tendency in humans to really call out to God when things are bad. But when things are going good, it's like, there's no care for God at all. And so, okay, is he wrong in pointing this out, or is he right in pointing this out? Well, he's right there, but it's interesting. His conclusion is God's not going to be paying attention to any of these prayers. That seems to be his conclusion. And that is born by an inexperience and a lack of self-knowledge. Because the reality is, those who are aware of their weakness of faith. Everyone who prays is aware of the weakness of their prayers. If you know yourself, you know constantly that when you're praying, you're actually wrestling against self-interest all the time. It's like it's right there with you all the time. So if you actually know yourself, you know that if it's truly the case that God does not listen to anyone's prayers unless they're perfect, unless they have the perfect motivation, unless they have everything figured out, well, guess what? No prayers should be uttered at all to God. Because none of us are perfect. None of us have that ability. We are weak. Our faith isn't perfect. And the whole book of Job has been showing us that God doesn't wait for us to be perfect before he wants to meet us. You look at all of Job's prayers are the complete antithesis of this. Because he is praying out of the outflow of his heart, and his words are not always the most refined, the most clear, the most, orthodox things in the world. Because he's in pain, he's in bitterness of soul, and he is pouring out how he's feeling. And if God was waiting for him to be perfect, he wouldn't get there. This is, in fact, the means through which God is bringing Job into closer fellowship with him. But Elihu, because he's not aware of himself, he doesn't have that self-knowledge, he doesn't understand that. And instead, he is unsympathetic and cold and harsh. But really, his anger is because he doesn't know himself. And yet, he still tries to answer Job's grief. He still tries to answer it. And this is like everything coming together of this theme we've been seeing throughout this whole book about answering grief. In this attempt to vindicate God, Elihu and the friends and everybody else that's trying to answer grief, what we actually end up doing is we end up playing God. We end up playing God. Like, like when scientists are said, oh, you shouldn't be playing God, right? Oh, let's make some dinosaurs or something like in Jurassic Park. We know this is not going to end well. Scientists shouldn't be playing God. And yet, we, like Elihu, try to answer grief, which only God's able to do. Is that not equally playing God? Because think about it, what does it mean to answer the grief? It means your wholeness, your completeness, the resolution to everything is going to be found in God. He's the one that can answer it. But if we think we can answer it, what we believe is that we're the ones that can provide wholeness to another person. And that applies to grief, but that applies to all kinds of other things, right? Like you entered into a relationship with a person that's got major red flags, and yet I can fix them. Is that not equally you thinking you can provide the wholeness that this other person needs? Is that not you equally thinking you can play God? We do this all the time. Even something like as good as I want to be a role model for somebody. It's like there's a danger there too, that you want them to be looking at you as opposed to them actually looking to God, who's the only one that's able to provide that wholeness, that completeness. But when we seek to answer grief, when we seek to answer anybody, it's almost like this self-idolatry. And we think that we can be God. We play God. And it's hard. Like with Elihu here, he thought he could do it. But what did he end up doing? He ended up crafting very simplistic answers that never answer anything. He doesn't actually answer anything, but he thinks he does. Someone perfect in knowledge is with you. And this is all summed up finally in chapter 37. It's very interesting. In chapter 37, the ignorance of Elihu is just perfectly encapsulated because as he begins to wind down his long monologue, he makes a lot of comments about rain, about hail, snow, whirlwind, lightning, rumbling, that there's a whirlwind. It seems like he is commenting on an approaching storm. And he uses this opportunity, this storm as they're talking or whatever, this storm's coming, he uses this as an opportunity to just be very poetic. He's waxing eloquently about his opinions. And, he'll say, oh yeah, the clouds are like God's garments. And he says in verse 23, we actually can't find the Almighty. We never are able to see him. We can't find him. We see his works, but we never see him. And then what happens immediately in chapters 38, verse 1? Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. The very whirlwind, the very storm that it seems like Elihu's commenting on here, the irony is very thick. God is literally approaching this group of people, and Elihu uses the moment to wax poetically in his absolute genius, not able to recognize that God is literally about to meet them and about to speak with them. The guy who claims to be perfect in knowledge, he can't see what's right in front of his eyes. And the God of whom he has spoken so confidently, that he has been playing confidently, that God's about to show up. And Elihu is too blind to see this. In all, this kind of sums up for us what's wrong with Elihu and everything about a system that believes we can answer for God. That we're able to provide wholeness to another person. That thinks we can play God. But the reality is, the book of Job has made this very clear. Wisdom and understanding is kind of beyond us as humans. We can't find it, and so we actually have to trust God, the only one who can speak. And in the end, if you read through the end of the book, you'll know that Elihu is actually just like this little footnote in the story of Job. You'll notice that at the end of the book, when God is rebuking the three friends, guess who doesn't even get mentioned? Elihu. Elihu doesn't even get mentioned. It's as if this dude who's inexperienced in life had caused him to think he could answer Job without any sympathy, without any kindness, that made him think he could play God. It's as if this person's opinion merit no comment at all. No one asked for his opinion, and no one cares. Which I think is actually kind of instructive, because I'm like, I'm more Elihu than I would want to be. I think all of us could say that too. It's like we think we can do this. It's actually just like a little footnote that doesn't even merit a comment. The temptation, though, to play God is actually really strong. Like that we could fix a person. We can't. We are too weak for that. But we can facilitate a person's healing. We can't heal a person. But even Elihu's motivations, right, are probably not bad, right? He, like Job's friends, wanted to answer Job's grief, wanted to answer it. You just can't do it because we're not perfect in knowledge, no matter how much we might think we are. And so instead, what are we supposed to do? Instead of seeking to provide that wholeness to another person, which we can't do, instead, we are to bear each other's burdens with a sympathetic and a kind ear. That's what we're called to do. As they mourn a life that's been lost, whether it's somebody else in their lives or it's themselves, as they mourn a life that was lost and as they come to embrace what reality is in conversation with a God that can make them whole, our job in that process is not to provide the wholeness, the healing, it's to provide that sympathetic ear and to help bear their burdens. May we be people who do not see ourselves as the answer, but see ourselves as those who support those who are seeking the one true God who is the answer. Amen? Amen.
Turn me on. Pastor Jeremy, thank you very much for the study in Job. Wow, what a lot we've learned. I should ask you, what's your favorite book of the Bible? And I would say it's probably not Job, but it may become one of your top books of the Bible once Pastor Jeremy is done. For those who don't know, he's a professor of Old Testament studies and teaches at a college, and we're so privileged to have him here as one of our pastors. Let's stand, and Rafaela, can you put a slide up on the screen here for us for a moment? I don't know if all of you know that Brian Dirksen, who has written so much wonderful music for us over the last few years, passed away on July 21st. While we were busy with some of our summer activities, and we want to do a little tribute, just singing one song, one of his many songs. And this is not the most popular one, but I just thought it fit this morning. So let's sing this without very much practice. To the river I am going, bringing sins I cannot bear. Come and cleanse me, come forgive me. Lord, I need to meet you there. In these waters, healing mercy flows with freedom from despair. I am going to that river. Lord, I need to meet you there. Precious Jesus, I am ready to surrender every care. Take my hand now, lead me closer. Lord, I need to reach you there. Come and join us in the river. Come and find beyond compare. He is calling, he is waiting. Lord, he needs you there. He is calling, he is waiting. Jesus longs to meet you there. The chorus again. Precious Jesus, I am ready to surrender every care. Take my hand now, lead me closer. Lord, I need to meet you there. Take my hand, Lord, lead me closer. Lord, I need to meet you there.
As a reminder, if you're going to the workshop, go to the gym for meal right after. Benediction comes from Galatians chapter 6, where it says this: bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. For if anyone thinks he is something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. Amen. Go in peace.
In the morning, when I rise in the morning, when I rise in the morning, when I rise, give me Jesus, give me Jesus, give me Jesus. You can have all this world. Give me Jesus. When I come to die, when I come to die, when I come to die, give me Jesus, give me Jesus, give me Jesus. You can have all this world.